Namaste. Today, in this lecture, we are going to be speaking on concepts of divinity in the Bhagavad Gita. So, the topic of concept of divinity in the Bhagavad Gita is not an easy topic, and many commentators, both medieval and modern, have been engaged with this topic in various and creative ways. I'd like to start with quoting two scholars, Riccardo Silvestre and Alan Herbert, and let's see what they write about concepts of divinity in the Bhagavad Gita. They write, it might be argued, for example, that the Gita portrays a kind of monotheism, and they give the relevant verses, in which Vasudeva Krishna, God, possesses attributes such as personhood, omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, eternity, aseity, and immutability. Besides, he is the source of all excellences, the supreme being, the source, origin, and dissolution of the cosmos, as well as its sustainer and support. But things are not that simple. From a philosophical point of view, it is important that the attributes assigned to God be conjointly consistent. That's what they write, end quote. So, Silvestre and Herbert quote Surendranath Dasgupta, important scholar, who writes, now I'm going to quote Dasgupta, the famous Surendranath Dasgupta, who wrote it about 100 years ago. From these examples, it is evident that the Gita does not know that pantheism, deism, and theism cannot well be jumbled up into one consistent philosophical creed. That's from Dasgupta in 1922, a little more than 100 years ago. Their solution, I mean Silvestre and Herbert, their solution to this challenge is to articulate the Gita's concept of God in terms of the philosophy of religion as panentheism, a position often portrayed as situated between theism and pantheism. Silvestre and Herbert have defined the challenge according to which the attributes assigned to God be conjointly consistent. I contend that by adopting a personalistic point of view, this challenge can be addressed satisfactorily. In order to do that, the notion of the person underlying the Bhagavad Gita should be addressed, and moreover, the Gita's poetic nature should be addressed as well. And now I quote John Rolfe Bengstone. In his book, The Worldview of Personalism, Origins and Early Developments, John Rolfe Bengstone states that personalism exists in many different forms, and the two best known forms are American personalism, initiated by Bowden Parker Bound, and the French school of Emmanuel Mondier. However, he considers that there are also strong currents of phenomenological personalism, existentialist personalism, and Catholic personalism. Although there are many significant differences between these various forms, as personalisms, they also have much in common. Their positions often overlap, and historically they can be seen to have stood in more or less close contact, to have influenced each other. So now I'm referring to the philosophical branch of personalism. Personalism also exists in Hindu thought, and specifically Ramanuja, representing theistic Vedanta. He is considered as such. Indeed, I have been designated by colleagues as contemporary South Asian personalist, I personally. And to my mind, it is possible to understand the concepts of divinity in the Bhagavad Gita by adopting a personalistic point of view. In other words, once the Gita is considered to be a conversation between two persons, that is, Krishna and Arjuna, the various notions of divinity can be categorized systematically. As such, I propose to look at these theological portions of the Gita not as a philosophical treatise promoting or defending a certain point of view while arguing with an opponent or purva pakshi, rather as a transformative conversation where Krishna gradually leads Arjuna to higher and deeper understanding of divinity through a personal encounter. A Applying our model, it seems that Krishna encourages him, Arjuna, to ascend the existential ethical ladder step by step, according to his mental state or state of realization. So now I want to address the term person. In denoting the term person, what is a person? Some clarification may be needed, as in attempting to articulate notions of personhood within Hinduism, one faces a translation problem. The term person is a somewhat Western imposition on Indian culture, and the uncertain status of the notion of person in India is conditioned by the fact that it is foreign to the Sanskrit tradition and has no adequate rendering in any of the Sanskritic languages. When dealing with either the human being or the deity, Indian philosophy always worked with other concepts, which rarely imported the holistic signification of the person. This is a quote by a scholar called Smith. As the term person has no adequate rendering in any of the Sanskritic languages, various terms such as Atman, Purusha, Jiva, Ishvara, Bhagavan, Avatara, and Murti are used to denote both human and divine persons within various contexts. The term person has a long history, dating back to the Greek-Roman period, where it was used to denote the stage masks of the actors. This is by Marcel Mauss, famous scholar. It has taken the meaning of a dramatic hero and hence became applicable by the Stoics to every human being, as all are endowed by God to play on the world stage. The Roman law defined the citizens as persons, and as opposed to slaves, they had legal rights and duties. Boethius coined the basic definition of the person, emphasizing the quality of rationality as characterizing personhood. Accordingly, a person is an individual substance of a rational nature. This is a quote by Henry Chadwick, a famous contemporary scholar, passed away 20 years ago. The Christian tradition adopted the term to designate the Trinity. As it viewed all men as brothers, it considered all to be persons, whether free citizens, slaves, or foreigners. In the medieval period, the term person was considered to belong to the realm of responsible action and to refer to an intellectual and morally free subject. Consequently, Thomas Aquinas, refined Boethius' definition finally to declare that person means an integral and unitary self-subsistent subject characterized by intellectual consciousness, moral freedom, and all properties ensuing from these defining notes. Prominent among these properties were privacy, ownership of natural rights, moral responsibility being a source of values in its own right, and the capacity to initiate interpersonal relationships. It was also such that it could, with due precision, apply analogically to the divine as well as to human persons. This is also a quote by Smith. This usage remained as such for hundreds of years, but was later restricted to mean human individuals, whereas its application to the divine was taken as mere anthropomorphic. The translators of Sanskrit works in the late 19th century translated the terms Nirguna and Saguna Brahman as impersonal and personal Brahman. Other terminology used by them was to refer to Nirguna Brahman as the Absolute and to Saguna Brahman as the Ishvara or God. Underlying this obscure usage of terms was the assumption that the Hindu personal notions were not absolute. Against this background, it becomes understandable that the question of personhood in Indian thought has become far too complex and obscure to be dealt with beyond the constraints of modern humanism. Yet the materials for Indian recognition of the person are present both in the theologies and in the various anthropologies of the Indian tradition. This is also a quote by Schmidt. We have developed this topic elsewhere in my other book and have articulated a notion of personhood which I think underlies the Bhagavad Gītā. So now I'm going to offer my own definition of personhood, which I think, or I argue, befits the Bhagavad Gītā. And that's a definition. I'll share a screen. A specific individual, conscious and rational being whose nature is enjoyment, desires creativity and reciprocal relationships with other similar beings. So this is what I suggest is the befitting, the proper, the suitable definition of the person underlying the Bhagavad Gita. A specific individual, conscious and rational being whose nature is enjoyment, desires, creativity, and reciprocal relationships with other similar beings. As opposed to highlighting rationality as the essence of personhood, this definition does not consider rationality to be a person's prime quality. Rather, it considers rationality to be a quality among other qualities, such as being conscious, aspiring for enjoyment, having desires, being creative, and reciprocating relationships with other similar persons. As such, we believe that this definition is more balanced and holistic, and as such better befits the Bhagavad Gita. Now, I'd like to go a little in another direction and discuss the poetical nature of the Bhagavad Gita and the root metaphor of thought of practice. You remember that the Gita is a song. Gita is song. So that's its poetical nature is to be considered. Having gone for the definition of personhood, which to our mind fits the Gita, I would like to suggest that understanding this conversation between these two persons, that is Krishna and Arjuna, requires not only logic, but also a poetical sensitivity. It may not come as a surprise, as the Bhagavad Gita is a Gita, song, sacred song, a poem. As such, it may be in place to offer a brief critique of language in both its direct or philosophical and indirect or poetical application, and its ability to grasp divinity through philosophy. The nature of direct language and philosophies is to exist within the sphere of rationality and logic. It is characterized by its ability to extract the general and abstract principles from many specifics and particulars in a direct, exact, and concise manner, thereby distinguishing the true from the false. The nature of literature and poetry is different, as it is characterized by an ability to trigger and arouse emotions through an indirect, suggestive usage of language. Edwin Giraud sheds light on this and writes, literature is work of sensibility, that it takes as a principle some notion of taste, ties it to a certain time and place more radically and meaningfully than any of the forms of expression that have a more theoretical grounding. That's a quote by Edwin Giraud. Giraud emphasizes literature's way of sensing reality, which is by tasting as opposed to rationalizing. He points out that literature ties a taste to a specific time and place more than other forms of expression, which are more theoretical. It may well be that philosophy focuses more on the substance, which is general, and less on the attributes that are specific. Thus, for example, when saying that a chair is a separate seat for one person, typically with a back and four legs, philosophy would relate to an abstract chair and not to any particular one with particular attributes related to a specific time and place. Similarly, logic is formal as it perceives the form of an object and ignores its specific attributes. Poetry, on the other hand, has the ability to intensify the specific and particular qualities of a specific object. Examining a flower, for example, the philosophical approach would concentrate on its flowerhood, that is, its essential and minimal components, which are indeed needed for it to be a flower. In order to do that, it will minimize a perception, or in other words, further relaxation of its peculiar and personal characteristics, in favor of emphasizing and intensifying its abstract and impersonal essence of flowerhood. A poetical approach would, on the contrary, intensify its particular personal characteristics. It's being red, it's having thorns for protection, it's being fragrant, and it's being mildly covered with morning dew. At the same time, further a relaxation or minimize a perception of its abstract and impersonal characteristics, that is, its flowerhood. It follows that philosophical language favors abstraction, whereas poetical language favors specification, that is, concentration on the detailed and the peculiar. The conclusion of this discussion is that in analyzing the personal conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, in which Krishna gradually reveals to Arjuna various notions of divinity, it should be taken not as a philosophical treatise, rather as a personal conversation with poetical aspects. As the notion of personhood is central to our work, we may look at it more closely. The discourse of personhood has not only religious but philosophical and specifically ontological aspects as well. In other words, the impersonalist believes that underlying the whole of reality there exists an impersonal or abstract principle. Conversely, the personalist believes that it is ultimately a person who underlies reality. Emerson Cohen, a famous American personalist, raises a related question and makes a subsequent claim. Is the person or is matter in motion the root metaphor of thought and practice? That answered all as follows. Let's go. This question seems to have deep existential implications. Accordingly, everyone has some idea of the root metaphor of thought and practice, whether it is personal or impersonal, and one's entire worldview is a derivative of that. A truly personal approach, considering that the person is the root metaphor of thought and practice, would assume that the abstract ideas emerge or emanate from a person. As such, in looking at the concepts of divinity in the Bhagavad Gītā, we propose to accept a personal approach, assuming that a person is the root metaphor of thought and practice, and consequently consider the abstract aspects of divinity to be its derivatives. Based upon that, we aim to demonstrate how the Gita's notion of divine personhood represents various mixtures of these two modes of perception and expression. So, I have argued for personhood, I have offered my own definition of the person, and now I'm going to try to categorize the various notions of divinity in the Bhagavad Gītā into our three-story house model, and specifically into the three stories. I'm going to categorize them into the first humanistic story, second spiritualistic story, and third liberated story. The logic being is that when someone is in the first story, that humanistic world of Dharma, which kinds of divinity he or she sees. Then, when one is in the second story, which concepts of divinity do they see? And similarly, when one is in the third story, which kind of notions of divinity do they see? So, now I'm going to discuss first story, concepts of divinity. I hope you follow my logic. I've discussed personhood, and now I'm going to categorize the various notions of divinity into my model of three stories. Having argued for that the understanding of the concept of divinity in the Gita requires a suitable definition of personhood, as well as recognition of its poetic nature, along with its philosophical one, we may now look at the various concepts through our methodology of divided reality. In other words, there seem to be concepts of divinity seen from the first story, from the second, and from the third story. Apparently, some notions of divinity appeal to those in the first story, some appeal to those in the second story, and some to those in the third story, according to their state of mind, their consciousness, or the state of progress along the ethical ladder. For example, one who abides by first story consciousness and what we call the world of Dharma would be impressed by the avatara, the divine descending to establish Dharma and oppose Dharma. One who is established in the second story would be impressed by the person in the heart, Paramatma, which is a notion of divinity corresponding to yogi consciousness. One who is situated in the third story, being established in the liberated state, will see the Supreme Lord in his various manifestations, both immanent and transcendent, or alternatively, realizes oneness with Brahman. We will now categorize the notion of divinity into the three-story division and also according to the personal or abstract division. In the first story, that of Dharma, the general rule in terms of values is to prosper. As such, worldly happiness and prosperity are desired and are good. In terms of being, the individual is defined in the story as human being or any other living being, such as an animal, plant, or other. As the first story is humanistic, the notions of divinity are seen from the point of view of Dharma. That is a vision of divinity that furthers prosperity and supports Dharma. We would like to exemplify this category through sections from chapter 3 and 4. First section looks at absolute divinity, that is Brahman as the source of Dharma. And I share screen and I quote from chapter 3, verse 15. Dharmic activity is born of Brahman, which is in the Veda, and Brahman springs from the eternal Om. Therefore, the all-pervading Brahman is eternally present in the sacrifice. Apparently, in this section, divinity is described in abstract terms as Brahman, which is said to be present in the sacrifice, awards the Vedic sacrificial activity the presence of divinity. And the second section is the first instance in the Bhagavad Gītā where Krishna hints at his own divinity as the object of surrendering all activities and a teacher whose teachings can release one from the bondage of karma. So I'm sharing screen again. And this is 3:30. Surrendering all your activities unto me, with mind fixed on the highest self, without desire and avoiding possessiveness, cast lethargy aside and fight. Those who always follow this doctrine of mine while being faithful and eschewing envy, they too are released from their karma bondage. But those who reject my teachings out of envy and thus do not practice them are deluded in all their knowledge. Know that these fools are lost. So this is the second section. The third section introduces the famous avatar doctrine, according to which a supreme person is sent to this world in order to establish dharma and oppose adharma. Moreover, this famous section also reinforces the idea that the supreme is the creator of the fourfold social division into varnas. So now I'm reading from the 4th chapter. The blessed Lord said, "Many births have I passed, and so did you, Arjuna. I know all of them, but you know not. O Parantapa, although I was never born and myself am imperishable, and although I am the Lord of all beings, when I take on material nature that I own and control, I come into being through my own supernal power. Indeed, whenever a decline in dharma occurs and a surge of adharma, then I myself appear." Very famous, yada yada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata bhutanam adharmasya tadatmanam sujamyaham. Very famous verses. To rescue the good and the pious, to destroy the evildoers, and to re-establish dharma, I myself descend age after age. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I have created the 4 social classes according to the divisions of the gunas and modes of work. Although I am the creator of the system, know that I am forever non-doer. So these are all notions of divinity seen from the first and humanistic point of view. Krishna states that both himself and Arjuna have undergone many births in the past, birth which he himself remembers while Arjuna does not. At this point, Krishna dramatically reveals his divinity and declares his position as the supreme ruler of all, possessing supernatural powers. Krishna now propounds the famous Avatara theme, Whenever Dharma is weakened or harmed and Adharma is on the rise, there and then he himself appears. The purpose of his appearance is the re-establishment of Dharma, the protection of the pious, and the destruction of the evildoers. In class, he declares that the Varna system, which is an essential component of Dharma, is of a divine origin. In regard to this section, Zehner writes that God should be made man not only unthinkable in the Judeo-Arab tradition, it is blasphemous, and Caiaphas did well as high priest of Yahweh to rend his robes when Jesus made the unheard claim to be Son of God. In India, that's where Zehner says, the reaction would have been somewhat different, for in the time of the Upanishads, God or other, but a rather divine, was felt to interpenetrate everything, and would not occur to anyone that he was particularly wrong to claim to be God or even God. Okay, we'll skip all that and go a little further. So that was a discussion, or that was a proposal for first story notions of divinity. And now I'd like to present second story's notions of divinity. In the second story, the value of worldly prosperity is rejected in favor of non-attachment to the world and indifference to both worldly happiness and worldly distress, along with yoking oneself to higher reality, that of moksha. In terms of being, the individual person does not consider himself or herself any longer a human or other being, but as an eternal spiritual soul bound by the laws of samsara. Thus, the individual's subjective identity is no longer that of a human being, rather that of an eternal spiritual soul or self. And the second story is characterized by yoga. The concepts, or rather visions of divinity, are meditational. That is, represent deep yogic meditation and supply objects to be meditated upon at the time of death. So the following section clearly offers such images of the Supreme Person as objects of such meditations. So I hope that you can see my point. And now we are discussing second story visions of divinity, and these are different. That's what a person who is situated in the higher realm, which I call the world of yoga, what he or she sees. So now I'm reading from the 8th chapter, 8.8. All Partha, he who meditates on the Supreme Divine Person through constant yoga practice with an unswerving consciousness, goes to him. Vyasa yoga yuktena chaitasa namya chaitasa nanya gamina paramam purusham divyam yati paratanochintaya. One should meditate on him as the ancient seer, as the controller, as smaller than the atom, as the supporter of all, as having an inconceivable form, as brilliant as the sun and beyond darkness, his mind unwavering, absorbed in devotion, supported by the strength of yoga, his life air focused between the eyebrows. One who is thus established at the hour of death reaches that Supreme Divine Person. So that's a meditative vision of divinity. The following section is not exactly a description of the Supreme Person, but a description of the Supreme Abode to be achieved after a successful death. And in that sense, it is also a yogi concept, preparing one for the moment of death. Now I'm reading from the 8th chapter. Yet there also exists another state, unmanifest and eternal, which is higher than the former unmanifest state. While all beings perish, that state does not itself perish. It is said to be eternal as well as imperishable, and they declare to be the supreme destination. Upon reaching it, none returns here. That is my supreme abode. That Supreme Person is attainable by single-minded devotion. Within him all beings exist. By him everything is pervaded. So, as such, the state of struggling within samsara is contrasted with the state of living in the spiritual abode of the Supreme Person. Mentioned here only in brief. Apparently, this state represents the highest goal to be aspired to be and served as a source of inspiration for yogic departure from the earthly existence. The following section is a rather mystical description of divinity. At first, it refers to abstract Brahman. This is 12th chapter. I shall speak now about the object of knowledge, knowing which you shall attain the eternal. This is beginningless Brahman and subordinate to me. It is said to have neither existence nor non-existent. This is 13th chapter, of course, not 12th chapter. 13th chapter, verse 12. In general, Brahman denotes abstract or impersonal divinity. Its canonical definition is given in the Brahma Sutra as that from which proceeds the creation, sustenance, and destruction of all beings. It is thus the most general ontological principle, and in theistic Vedanta, it is also identified with personal divinity as such Vishnu or Krishna. That's a quote by a famous scholar called Alexander Uskov. The text commences to describe the Paramatman, which is a personal form of divinity residing within the heart, known also as Antaryamin, and accompanying the embodied soul in its voyage through the world of samsara. So now I'm reading from 13th chapter, continuing. That was verse 12, now verse 13. Everywhere are its hands and legs, its eyes, heads, and faces, and similarly its ears, which exist everywhere in the world. As such, is all encompassing and aware of everything. Although devoid of perceptible qualities, he appears to possess them. Although he maintains everything, he is unattached to anything. He is free from the gunas, but nevertheless experiences the gunas. He exists inside and outside of all creatures. He is unmoving and moving. His subtlety makes him difficult to comprehend. He is at once remote and nearby. Although he seems to be divided among all beings, he is actually undivided. He is to be known as the maintainer, devourer, and creator of all creatures. It is said that he is the light of lights, situated beyond darkness. He is knowledge, the object of knowledge and the goal of knowledge. He abides in everyone's heart. Thus the field, knowledge, and the object of knowledge have been described briefly. Knowing this, my devotee attains to my nature. So that was a very, I would say, mystical description of divinity found in the 13th chapter. This interesting idea is also encountered in the Upanishads, and it makes an important contribution to the diverse concept of divinity found in the Bhagavad Gītā. This form is usually associated with yogic or mystic contemplation and naturally evokes serene and peaceful moods, which are representative of quietistic and mystic states of mind. According to Vaishnava theology, the Antaryamin, or inner ruler, is a form of the deity that dwells in the human heart, guides it, and accompanies it through the experiences of heaven and hell. That's quoted by Klostermaier. The Katha Upanishad, chapter 4, describes the personalized divinity quite explicitly. So now I'm quoting the Katha Upanishad to explain this form of divinity called Antaryamin. A person the size of a thumb resides within the body, Atman, the Lord of what was and what will be. From him he does not hide himself, so indeed is that. The person the size of a thumb is like a fire free of smoke, the Lord of what was and what will be, the same today and tomorrow, so indeed is that. This is a translation by Patrick Oliver. I have another quote from the Shveta Upanishad, chapter 4, describes the relations of the two souls, the minute and the supreme, as two birds nestling on the same tree. So now I'm reading Shveta Upanishad. Two birds who are companions and friends nestle on the very same tree. One of them eats a tasty fig, the other, not eating, looks on. Stuck on the very same tree, one person grieves the Lord by her who is not the Lord. But when he sees the other, the contented Lord, and the Lord's majesty, his grief disappears. That's also a translation by Oliver. The Paramatman is a sort of personal providence who rules, guides, and accompanies the Atman in a journey through samsara. As he escorts every living being separately and witnesses its deeds, he is said to possess thousands of arms and legs. He is subtle and unseen. It is said that he is very close, but at the same time, hard to reach. The person within the heart is a divine manifestation that encompasses both personal and impersonal traits. The Paramatman is personal in the sense of having personal features, such as majestic form, whereas the impersonal aspect is expressed by his being ubiquitous. I'll share screen again. That's again chapter 13. The Supreme Person, named Paramatman, is said to exist in this body. He is the observing witness and consenter. He is the supporter. He is the Supreme Person. He experiences everything and is the great Lord. The eternal Paramatman, Supreme Person residing in the heart, although residing in the body, does nothing at all and is never tainted, because of his being without beginning and beyond the gunas. Upadrashtana mantacha bharata bhokta maheshvara paramatma dichap yukto deshmin purusha apara. That's verse 22. So now let me summarize the second story concepts of divinity. So in summary, second story concept of divinity serve as objects of yogic meditation and as such serve as source of inspiration for ascending the ethical ladder and striving for freedom from samsara and achieving liberation. So that was a description of the notions of divinity seen by the person in the second story. That's what he or she sees, these mystical visions. And now I'm going to address third story concepts of divinity. So the third story contains the most theologically rich concept of divinity. Having gradually ascended the ethical ladder, these descriptions serve to establish Arjuna firmly in the third story stage so that he will not descend back again, rather remain on that existential platform. The third story is rich with theological descriptions of divinity, whether these refer to the Supreme as Krishna, the personal God, to an immanent concept of divinity, to the various manifestations, to the universal person, or to Brahman, the impersonal divinity. Now I quote Jonathan Edelman. He writes that in the Gita, God can be discussed as an individual being with distinct qualities, a body with specific features, a name, and so forth. And at the same time, God can be discussed as beyond such descriptions, as pure being unqualified by attributes. While the terms Brahman and Krishna can be used interchangeably, for the most part, Brahman refers to a non-dual, unqualified reality that transcends the vicissitudes of time and space, yet dwells in and pervades all reality. Krishna, on the other hand, is the qualified, transcendent, and ultimate personal being who freely descends to the world and self-reveals. That's by Jonathan Edelman. The main third story theological descriptions are to be found in the Gita's central section comprising chapters 7 to 12. It is in these chapters that the text goes beyond discussions of dharma, beyond the level of yoga, reincarnation, and mental restraint, and offers various visions of the Supreme, or what we call the third story vision. In the third story, the ideal value is the experience of Brahmananda, or the bliss of Brahman, alternatively deep emotions of love and subordination directed towards the Supreme Person. Thus, the perceptions of indifference and non-attachment of the second story are replaced by deep attachment to the Supreme Person and deep love expressed by loving feelings towards him. Alternatively, the bliss of Brahman or Brahmananda. The opening verse of chapter 7 is significant. I share screen. The blessed Lord said, O Partha, with your mind attached to me, being fixed in yoga and finding refuge in me, you can know me entirely and beyond doubt. Touch, here now. So, this verse hints at the discussion's ascension from the second to the third story. This high point of view no longer propounds knowledge of yoga and sensual restraint, but knowledge of the Supreme Person and devotion unto him, seen from a liberated third story point of view. The first characteristic of this new and higher state is Maya Sakta Manaha, literally meaning with your mind attached to me. Sorry. One important element of this framework is offered right at the beginning. The word asakta is significant and means attachment, and Zener refers to that also in his commentary. Now, let me read a little more. Krishna now emphasizes the significance of the knowledge he's about to disclose and points out that perfection is attained by few, and indeed even fewer are those who receive the knowledge of the Supreme as a person. Among thousands among men, hardly anyone strives for perfection, and even among those who have striven and achieved perfection, hardly anyone knows me in truth. That's 7.3. Manushyanam sahasrashu kashir yatati siddhaye yatatam apisidanam kashinam vetitatvataha. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intellect, and ego, these 8 comprise my separated lower nature. Now Krishna reveals his lower nature. Bhumir apona lovayu kamano buddhir evacha ahankara ityame bina prakritir ashtada. But you should know that besides this lower nature, Almighty Honored One, there is another higher nature of mine, comprised of spirit souls by which this world is sustained. Parayam itastvanyam vidi prakriti me param jiva bhuta mahabhaoye edam dharyate jagat. So now Krishna is revealing all these third story visions. Realize that all entities have the source in these two natures. I am the origin of this entire universe, and it's the solution too. So that's third story visions. Here in the 7th chapter, we are looking into third story visions. I'd like to refer to Ramanuja. The vision of Krishna's two natures resembles Ramanuja's doctrine of Sharira, Shariri Bhava. According to both the gross and subtle elements, and then the spirit souls comprise Krishna's lower and higher natures. A unique characteristic of Ramanuja's doctrine is his idea of the souls and the world relating to God as the body to the ensouled. Accordingly, the relation of the self to the body corresponds to the relation between grammatical subject and predicative, adjective, or substance and mode. There's a special characteristic of finite selves to be a mode in relation to the Supreme Person and substance in relation to the material things, which are their bodies or instruments. The idea of Sharira, Shariri Bhava may be considered in somewhat functional terms, emphasizing its being controlled and supported by that conscious being for its own purpose in all circumstances. The entire finite universe of souls and material bodies is also the body of God. Thus, God is the only ultimately substantial reality, and reality may be viewed as Vishishta Advaita, non-dual reality, which is eternally distinguished. That's by the famous scholar of Carmen, John Carmen. Now, the text proceeds to highlight an immanent concept of divinity as seen through nature. That's all third story visions of divinity. Now we're going to hear about immanent divinity in the 7th chapter. I love this section. O Dhananjaya, there exists nothing higher than me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Vata parataram anyat. Kinchidasti Dhananjaya, Mahi Pruta, Nam Proktam Sutre Manigada Iva. I am the taste of water, O Kuntiya, and I am the light of the sun and the moon. I am the sacred syllable Om in all the Vedas, the sound of ether, and I am the humanity in man. The pure fragrance of earth I am, and the brilliance of fire. I am the life of all living beings, and the austerity of the ascetics. Know me, Partha, to be the primeval seed of all creatures, the wisdom of the wise, and the splendor of the splendid. Of the mighty, I am might devoid of lust and passion, that desire in all creatures am I, which is not inconsistent with dharma. O Bharatarshava, know that all states of being, be they characterized by sattva, rajas, or tamas, have their source in me alone, but I am not in them, rather they are in me. The entire world is deluded by the 3 states of being produced by the gunas, and thus fails to recognize me who am eternally above them. Divine indeed and difficult to penetrate is my deluding power, consisting of the 3 gunas, but those who have surrendered to me alone, they can transcend it. Daivi esha gunamai mamamaya duratyaya mamevamye prapadyante mayamatam tarabhute. So this is a very beautiful section offering the vision of 3rd floor vision of immanent divinity, divinity in nature, light of the sun and the moon, sacred syllable Om, sound and ether, humanity in the human being, fragrance of the earth, brilliance of the fire, life of all living being, austerity of the ascetics, taste of water, a beautiful section indeed. So now Krishna offers Arjuna a vision through a direct experience, darshana. That's also 3rd story visions. Krishna opens the chapter 9 by complimenting Arjuna for his lack of envy, the qualification based upon which he is able to acquire the knowledge about it to be delivered. This is perceived or grasped directly by means of pratyaksha, or direct perception. It may well be that this kind of pratyaksha is a direct experience or vision of divinity, as may also be expressed by the term darshana. So here we have darshanas. And now let's read some darshanas where Krishna describes himself, divinity, in 3rd story terms. 9.4. I pervade the entire world in an unmanifest form. All beings rest in me, but I do not rest in them. And yet all beings do not rest in me. See my mystic splendor. I sustain beings, but rely not on them. My very self is the cause of their being. As the great wind that goes everywhere is eternally contained within space, know that similarly all beings are contained in me. So that's a beautiful description of the Supreme Person from the 3rd story point of view. The Supreme Person is simultaneously immanent and transcendent. Being immanent, the Supreme is very close. He is present everywhere in his invincible form. And all living entities are not only supported by him, but are controlled by him through the agency of nature, which he supervises. The entire world is contained within him, just as the wind is contained within space. But at the same time, the various entities do not rest upon him directly, but are helplessly controlled by nature. Nevertheless, he maintains a distinct and separate mode of existence, while resting on his nature alone, indifferent and unattached to worldly activities and the gunas. Viewed thus, the world is directly ruled by nature and only indirectly governed by the Supreme. These significant theological statements point to the rich and complex concept of divinity hereby presented. So now we have the 10th and 11th chapters. Theophanies means revelations of divinity to human being. Chapter 10 offers a rich variety of theophanies. Arjuna undergoes a change of heart, accepts Krishna's words as true, and subsequently is awarded with the 3 third-story revelations. The underlying logic is that the Supreme Person cannot be empirically known since he is the source of everything. Therefore, one must rely on the Supreme Himself in order to know Him. Arjuna's acceptance of the Supreme Person as the source of everything represents a state of enlightenment. And in this enlightenment, this enlightenment is intertwined with wholehearted devotion to Krishna. It seems that this state of perception is not the result of a detached, logical, or scholarly inquiry, rather a type of knowledge resulting from dependence upon and dedication to the Supreme Person. So that's 10th chapter. Now we are continuing this mode of darshans, third story darshans. 10:1-2. The blessed Lord said, again, Almighty armed Arjuna, as you are dear to me, please hear my supreme words spoken for your benefit. Neither the host of gods, nor the great seers, nor my origin. For in every respect, I am the source of the gods and of the sages. You knows me as the unborn, the beginningless, and as the great ruler of the world, that undiluted among mortals is freed from all sins. I am the source of all that exists. From me, everything emanates. The enlightened who thus know me, worship me with all their hearts. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajandimam buddha bhava samanvitaha. So that is a 10th chapter, and here Krishna explains to Arjuna how he can be known. He describes various states of existence as well as the ancient sages and the manus, of whom the population of the universe was generated, all of them originating from him. So that is 10th chapter, and it's a beautiful chapter. And let's read a little more from this 10th chapter about this third story revelation. Arjuna said, you honor the supreme Brahman, the supreme abode, the supreme purifier, the eternal divine person, the primal God, unborn and all-pervading. Thus have all the seers declared, the divine seer Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa, and indeed now you yourself declare it unto me. O Keshava, I believe all that you are telling me is true. O Lord, neither the gods nor the demons know your appearance. O Supreme Person, maintainer of all, Lord of all beings, God among gods, master of the world, you yourself know yourself through yourself. So, by now, having ascended the ethical ladder, step by step, and having attained the stage of the third story, his consciousness fixed, Arjuna absorbs this vision of Krishna's divinity, accepts it as true, and gives up all his argumentation. It appears that the experience of devotion and the ensuing acceptance of Krishna's divinity is of an uncritical character, as Arjuna has given up his argumentative approach in favor of a state of satisfaction and immersion in the divine vision. At this stage, Krishna reveals to Arjuna his vibhutis or manifestations. So that's what is happening now. The following section offers an elaborate description of such vibhutis. I will not read the whole section, but just a few exemplary verses. This is 10th chapter, verse 19. The blessed Lord said, so be it, I shall describe to you my main divine self-manifestations. As my plenitude is infinite, Of the Vedas, I am Samaveda. Of the gods, I am Indra. Among the senses, I am the mind. And of being, I am consciousness. Beings, I am consciousness. Of the great seers, I am Brigu. Of utterances, I am the syllable Om. Of sacrifices, I am the Japa sacrifice. And among immovable beings, the Himalayas. Of weapons, I am the thunderbolt. Of cows, I am the wish-fulfilling cow. In procreation, Kandarpa, the god of love. And among serpents, I am Vasuki. Of purifiers, I am the wind. Of warriors, I am Rama. Of sea monsters, I am the Makara. And among rivers, I am the Ganges, known as Jahnavi. Of creations, I am the beginning, end, and middle as well, O Arjuna. Of all types of knowledge, I am knowledge of the self. And among theoreticians, I am logic. I am death, who snatches away everything and the origin of things yet to be. Among women, I am fame, fortune, eloquence, memory, wisdom, steadfastness, and patience. Whatever creation manifests supernal splendor, you should understand it to originate from my splendor. But what is the point for you of this extensive description? I support this entire world with a mere single fraction of mine. So that's these vibhutis from the 10th chapter. Following the vibhuti concept of divinity, a central concept is presented in chapter 11, and a theophany at its best is presented. There's no doubt one of the Gita's peaks and an important revelation in terms of world religions. Krishna, Arjuna's close friend who has become his guru, turns now into a mighty universal God, Vishnu. As such, the friendly and relaxed discourse between the two changes into excited exclamations and declarations by Arjuna. Beholding the awesome, enormous, and terrifying exhibition of divine power, Arjuna finds it hard to retain his composure and resolve. So now I'm reading from chapter 11. This is the revelation of the universal form. I'll share screen. Sanjaya said, O king, having thus spoken, the great master of mystics Hari revealed to Partha his supernal majestic form, of countless mouths and eyes, of countless wonderful revelations, of countless divine ornaments, of countless divine weapons ready for battle, clad in celestial garlands and garments, anointed with divine perfumes, God whose whole being is wonderful, infinite, and turned towards all directions. If 1,000 suns were to rise at once in the sky, their splendor would have resembled the brilliance of that great form. At that time, the son of Pandu saw the entire universe with its diversity and variety united in the body of the God of gods. So, I will not read the whole 11th chapter, but apparently this revelation caused a transition from a friendly relationship to one of the respect and dread towards Krishna in his supernal form. Arjuna wishes to bow the Supreme Person again and again and to praise his greatness and power. Moreover, he regrets his previous familiar and formal behavior towards Krishna, not realizing who he truly was, and begs for his forgiveness. Apparently, both Arjuna and Krishna prefer the informal friendly exchange to the formal reverential mood, and moreover, the latter is somewhat alien to the prevailing mood of the Gita, which is relatively peaceful and discursive. As such, the Bhagavad Gītā offers rich and variegated third-story concept of divinity, and these serve to establish one on the liberated platform. So I try to summarize briefly what I try to do in this lecture. I try to show the problem of philosophizing the concepts of divinity or God in the Bhagavad Gītā. And I brought scholarly quotes saying that the Gita is not clear as far as its philosophical position or theological position, if you like, as far as concepts of divinity. So then what I did, I went step by step. First, I declared or stated that I'm going to take a personalistic approach. But then having done that, I questioned I questioned the term person. I said that the term person, it needs a further discussion, and I did that. And actually, I offered an alternative definition of personhood, my own definition of personhood. Having done that, I related to the Gita's poetical nature. I said Gita is a song, and I offered some discussion of the Gita's poetical nature, which also has to be taken into account. So after these introductions, I divided the notions of divinity in the Bhagavad Gītā into three realms according to my model: humanistic, yogic, and liberated. And I try to exemplify notions of divinity from each story or tier or level, and try to show how Krishna, in his personal conversation, is raising Arjuna to higher and higher notions of divinity. So that was my way of articulating notions of divinity in the Gita, basically stating that one sees notions of divinity from the point of view or from the existential point where he or she exists. Thank you very much.